My name's Jerry Green. I'm very grateful recovered alcoholic. I'm just glad to be here. I got sober in Andrews, Texas, June 10th, 2009, and that's because I had a sponsor over there that never gave up on me. And I got to come to a lot of meetings here and at the 710 and in Odessa, and I've spoken all those places, but I've never got to speak at the Serenity group, so this is kind of cool for me. Thank y'all so much for having me here. Now, if I say something that you think's remotely funny, you need to laugh, because I do have people spread around the room here that will help you laugh. God is so good. This is so different than how I used to live. I was born in Roswell, New Mexico, or came from a spaceship, I'm not sure which. I'm half Indian. I was put in an Indian orphanage in Albuquerque and got adopted by some really nice folks, but I was different than them and they were different than me, and I was sure it was because I was adopted. My childhood was pretty normal materially and everything, but it was really rough emotionally and kind of abusive, but they did the best they could. But I was convinced all that stuff was what made me different. When I got to high school, I was convinced I was different because I was 6'7" and weighed 160 and could trip over the free throw line on the basketball court. And I had glasses. That didn't make me too popular with the females in the high school. So I immediately found out that if I grew my hair out real long and started carrying some, forgive me, there's going to be a few drugs mentioned in my story because that's just part of my story. I know this is Alcoholics Anonymous, and trust me, I'm the real deal. You'll hear about that. This is also my story. It's how I got sober. If your sponsor wants you to get sober another way, by all means do that. But I know this has worked for me, and it's worked for hundreds and thousands of people. So we're really sticklers about getting sober the way the big book says to get sober. We're not so much. Our group in San Angelo, we have every meeting is a big book topic meeting. We have a 3-minute timer, which we've grown to love. Nobody's sitting over at a table in the back of our room trying to shoot themselves in the head because somebody's been going 20 minutes about their weed eater. We don't have that in our group. We don't talk about the problem in our group. We talk about the solution to the problem, because that's what saves people's lives. We can sit and talk about the problem all day long. It doesn't do you any good, doesn't do me any good. So I'll keep my story part fairly brief. I got in some trouble in Roswell. The judge told me I should go to the prison or go to the Navy. I told him, man, I always wanted to be a sailor. So there I went off to the Navy. I lasted there not that long, a little while. Got out, went back to Roswell, was going to go to college and become somebody. Met this girl. She told me, my daddy is a driller in the oil field and you can make $5 an hour being a roughneck. And I was like, $5 an hour? I didn't care what being a roughneck was. So we moved to Lovington and later to Andrews, and that's what I did all through my 20s. Was I worked on drilling rigs, pulled back drill pipe, worked derricks, rode motorcycles, did a lot of drugs and alcohol all through my 20s. Started off innocently enough, of course, it wasn't my fault. Back then, the only companies that didn't have you work 7 days a week were Cactus and Sharp, and the other was 7 days a week, no days off, 7 days a week, no days off, 7 days a week, no days off, until you just quit. And they wanted, a lot of times you'd have to double. And these guys had these little capsules, and they was putting this stuff in them, and they were eating them, and they were working them double and triple shifts, and I thought I'll try some of that, and it was pretty good. And a month later, I'm slamming methamphetamine in my arm as fast as I can. I don't think everybody that tried one of them capsules did that. That's my experience, is that I might be a little bit different than everybody else. I mean, I remember the night I was going to graduate boot camp in the Navy. They sent 25 of us or 30 of us. They told us we could go to the NCO club. I'm from Roswell, New Mexico, little bitty town. I'm down there in Orlando, Florida. And I mean, I walk in this place and there are lights and there's all these flowers and pretty drinks and umbrellas sticking out of them. And I thought, I'll try to just have one in each of those kind of drinks and see how that Well, when you get back to your barracks after you're out there, they call it the quarter deck, and they say you're supposed to salute and say, request permission to come aboard, sir. I saluted, threw up. Got in a lot of trouble, barely got to graduate boot camp, but all those other guys did what they were supposed to do, but not me. I've drank different from an early age from other people. I did drugs different from an early age from other people. With me, doing the drugs wasn't about just the drugs, it was about the entire lifestyle, which I loved. I wanted to be the biggest, baddest dealer in West Texas, and I probably came pretty close to that deal. Until I got pulled over in Andrews, Texas one night when I was 29 years old with 3 grams of dope, and they threw me in jail, me who had never been in jail, threw me in jail and kept me there and gave me a 10-year prison sentence. No probation, no nothing. They don't like that stuff in Andrews, Texas still, and they sure didn't like it in 85. I went to prison. Stayed there a year and a half on a 10-year sentence. Thank God they were overcrowded. Got out, did 8.5 years on paper, but definitely decided methamphetamine wasn't the way I wanted to go because that sucked being in prison. Now I knew some guys in there that they were just crazy and they'd go back and back and back and back, but I was born at night, but it wasn't last night, and I didn't want to do that. So my first wife divorced me while I was in prison, so I had this little spiritual experience in prison. And I was writing a letter to my cousin. When I get out of here, I need a 3,000 milliliter boiling flask. I need this, I need that. And I had this spiritual experience. I was in the prison hospital, the cell door. In prison, the racks are 6 feet 5 inches. I'm 6 feet 7 inches. You don't sleep with your head toward the bars because somebody might cut your throat. And so my feet were hanging out, and they rolled those doors and they cut one of my toes off. And so after hobbling a quarter mile to the infirmary and them stitching it up with no anesthetic at all and throwing me in that hospital room, I was mad, I was miserable, I was writing that letter. I swear, it seems like to me, maybe I don't remember it right, the cinder block walls 15 feet high with like a 15-watt light bulb up in the top. And something came over me and I thought, I don't want to live like this anymore. So I tore up that paper and I wrote a letter to the Andrews County News, still have a copy of it, to the kids in Andrews County about how I ended up there and they shouldn't do drugs and all that stuff. My wife, who was getting off of drugs at the time, my current wife, read that letter, started writing to me. I moved out of prison, and I know that was God because I moved out of prison and into her house, and I still live in her house 34 years later. God put that together. Unfortunately, I didn't listen to God for that long. I got out, she had some kids, we had some more kids, life happened. I got a job as an electrician's helper because I knew them drilling rigs was going to make me go back to doing bad stuff. Got a job as an electrician's helper, became an electrician. I was really talented. Got me a truck. 2 years later, I have 7 trucks. I'm running them out here at the old Texaco, maybe Chevron now. I had arrived. I had a company, and I was doing good. And I slowly built that company up to where in 1998, I had 59 employees scattered all the way from Andrews, Texas to Gillette, Wyoming, shop in all those cities, making money hand over fist, running those roads with an ego the size of Texas, and I got caught cheating on my wife. Now, we'd been married 12 years maybe at that time or something. Anyway, she left. And when she left all 4 kids with me. I thought she was going to stay away forever. I was hoping not, but I struggled along. But then I decided, you know what, I can't sleep, and that's when I picked up a bottle of vodka. And that vodka almost killed me in 11 years. I drank 11 years alcoholically, and that vodka almost killed me. She came home after about 3 months, and I've got this vodka thing going on, and she has this pain pill addiction that she didn't have. And I was making money hand over fist. We lived in this big old fancy house out by the hospital there in Andrews, 2-story house, giant thing, 15 acres, quarter horses. I mean, it looked beautiful from the outside. White fence, green acres out there for the horses and stuff. Looked beautiful. But on the inside, we were in the depths of our addiction, and it was decaying. It was diseased on the inside. And I always tell people we lived at the corner of Lower Tab and Smirnoff. That's where we lived. And things went on like that for a while. Kids kept getting older. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore, and I'm married to one tough woman. She decided she's going to get off them pain pills, and we're talking 30 of them big old Lortabs a day at the height of her addiction. And she went to that little AA meeting in Andrews. There were about 6 people there. And they didn't tell her, you're in the wrong place, you're an addict. They didn't tell her, you'll have to go to Odessa to NA or whatever. A little old couple that went there told her, you don't ever have to do this way or feel this way again. And she got sober, and I got pissed. Because my deal had always been, if you'll get off them pain pills, I can quit drinking, you know. And I'd also told her, but my wife never listens to me. Anyway, I told her, don't go down to AA and tell all our business. This is a little town. Like, everybody in town didn't know I was a friggin' drunk anyway, right? She went down to that AA building and told all our business. And I got curious because she came home and she had some help with some friends, and in a couple of weeks she had detoxed herself off all those pills and started working these steps, and she changed. And I couldn't understand it. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll go down there and see what's going on. I went down there and I met this guy named Jerry Hammond. Jerry Hammond, if you ever met him, you wouldn't forget him. He wore those old perma-pressed pants and a western shirt and a trucker cap and sandals everywhere he went. So, and I'm thinking, this guy doesn't have anything I want, you know, at all. He lives in this little bitty house. I'm living out there in that big fancy house. But something was different about him. He drank like I drank, and now he was happy. Couldn't figure that out. So I asked him, would he sponsor me? And he said yes. And for a year and a half, I would try to do this deal. And then I'd go off on a business trip to Dallas or somewhere and get hammered. Or toward the end, it got worse than that. That man never lost patience with me. I had pulled up in his backyard, told him I'll be over there in 20 minutes, ran to the line, got me a bottle of vodka at 10 in the morning, showed up at his house, passed out, fell out of my truck in his backyard. Him and his wife helped me get to the hospital and got me detoxed. I got drunk 3 days later. I mean, it just went on and on and on like that for a year and a half. And all this time, he's been having me listen to 2 speaker tapes all the time, two different guys on speaker tape. One was Don Major from Louisville, Kentucky, and the other was Chris Raymer from Hunt, Texas. And they don't mind me using their full names. In some kind of moment of some kind of semi-clarity up there in that bedroom in the top of that 2-story house with the balcony out front, which is where I'd sneak out and drink, I had a moment of clarity, and I told Mindy, try to get me in that treatment center where Chris Raymer is, which is down in Hunt, and she managed to do it. And then I had to do the scariest thing in my life. See, all my business was for Devon Energy, spread out all the way to Wyoming. And I had to call my boss at Devon Energy, and I had to say I'm going to treatment. It might have meant losing all my business, my employees losing their jobs and everything. But I made the phone call, and the lady's name was Kathy, and she said, well, thank God. She said, I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous for 25 years. I was hoping you'd get this deal. And I went to treatment. And when I got down there, they started, after I detoxed, they started talking to me about step one. And see, step one's the step that almost killed me, step one. I didn't think I was powerless over anything. So I had been to prison, I got out, I built up this successful company. I was one of them alcoholics that would drink and pass out at 10 or 11 o'clock and be up at 4 the next morning working on my computer. I was a functioning alcoholic. Unless you ask my wife or kids, they might not think I was functioning too well. But I had done all that and built that company and all that, and I had willpower. I made myself get up when I didn't want to get up. I did this, I did that, I did this, and I like to kill myself because I couldn't understand that my willpower would not fix this. And if you're here tonight and you're new, your willpower will not fix this. We're beyond human aid. That means my wife can't do it, the judge can't do it, the lawyer can't do it, hell, not even the state of Texas can do it. I finally understood that. And for the first time in my life, I understood that I could never drink or drug again. And that happened to me down there in that treatment center. And that was step one for me, and it took me 51 years to get step one. There's a lot of y'all in here that don't have to live 51 years to get step one. If you put alcohol or drugs in your body and you can't control the amount you take every time, that's the physical allergy. It's never going to go away. We can't do anything about that in AA. We're like people with their legs cut off. We never grow new ones. You pour vodka in me tonight, I'll be off to the races just like I was 12 years ago. Then there's that mental obsession. That mental obsession where it says in the book, I can't differentiate the true from the false. When I get here, when I get to a treatment center and I get here, the only truth I have is my experience. What has happened to me to this point in my life. It's the only truth I know. And my experience tells me when I do this stuff, things are going to go wrong. When I do this stuff, I'm going to wreck vehicles. When I do this stuff, I'm going to make my kids cry. When I do this stuff, I'm going to lose my house. When I do this stuff, bad things are going to happen. And my experience is telling me that, and then that disease in my brain called alcoholism kicks in and it says, oh no, it'll be okay. Yeah, you can just drink a couple this time. Yeah, you'll be all right. You can handle it. You can control it. You haven't drank in a while. You can control it this time. No, I can't. But when I got a brain that's to that point telling me that disease, and I got a body demanding more and more, I am hopelessly doomed. Hopelessly doomed. That's what step one means. Step one isn't about hope. Step one's about hopeless. I have no hope if I continue the way I'm going. I have no hope. But then in the very next paragraph it says those who seem doomed are suddenly able to control their desire for alcohol. And that comes by following a few simple rules, which are the 12 steps, Alcoholics Anonymous. Nothing will take their place. You can't skip them. You can't pick which order you do them in. You have to do them the way the book says do them. Get a sponsor that does it by the book. Now here's where I'm going to make some people mad, probably. The first 100 recovery alcoholics that got together, now you want to talk about a miracle? You get 100 alcoholics together to agree on anything, sober or not, it's a miracle. If you don't believe that, go to a few group consciences and you will be. They got together, they agreed on this, and miraculous things happened. The first thing they did was they put a word in here that nobody likes to use these days, but it's coming back a little bit. They put a word in here called recovered. Recovered. Well, where'd they hide that in the book? Well, it's on the title page. It's the first place it's in. The story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And it's listed a lot more times in the book. The only time it ever mentions recovering in the book is when it's talking about your family, and you'll probably always be recovering to your family because they don't trust it. This is the hope. If you're new and you're sitting here, this is the hope. The hope isn't going to an AA meeting where you hear that I've been sober for 20 years, but I can't go down the shiny aisle in Walmart. One day at a time, I'm going to make it. I work my program one day at a time because the sun don't come up twice in a day. I get connected with my God every morning. But I do not drink one day at a time. I haven't had the obsession to use alcohol or drugs in 11 and a half, 12 years. And it will happen for you. And here's the chances of it. Either 0% or 100%. If you do this deal and you work those steps, you will be delivered from this deal. You will be recovered. And if you keep working steps 10, 11, and 12, you will stay recovered. If you don't, you're toast if you're a real alcoholic or an addict. And if you're sitting here and you think there's a better way to do this, then go do it. And when you get back, if you live, we'll be here to love on you, and help you get through these steps. This is deadly serious, guys. I don't usually throw this in at this point, but I'm going to tonight. December 3rd, 2016 was the day my son was going to pick up his 1-year chip. But I'd noticed some stuff didn't seem quite right, but I just was hoping against hope I was wrong. And I'd let him move back into the house for a little while out of a sober house because I enabled him, and I'll regret that forever. But December 3rd, I went to wake him up that morning, and when I rolled him over, he was dead. From an overdose. Not just an overdose, but none of the drugs in him were of lethal enough amount to kill him, but he had so many in him, his heart stopped and he died. This is how serious I am about this program. I was supposed to speak at PDAP that night up here in Midland. And not because I wanted to, but because God made me. I came up here and spoke that night anyway. And it's a lucky thing I did, because that kept me focusing on doing this deal. Now, for a long time after he died, I was mad at God. You know, I boiled meditation down to this. I used to think, okay, I get in the right position here. I can meditate. I'm still kind of dorky and I can't get in those positions. I had a tough time with that for a long time. And then my sponsor said, why don't you just try going out on the porch and drinking a cup of coffee with God in the morning? Guess what? That's my meditation. For a lot of mornings after Matthew died, those talks with God were pretty much one-sided. It was me yelling at him, griping at him, cussing at him on a few times. But you know what? He didn't seem to care. What he cared about was I kept communicating. Yeah. And I kept taking the actions whether I wanted to or not, and my heart wasn't in it, but guess what? It got better. Mindy didn't. And so after her being 9 years sober, me at the time 7 years, she ended up relapsing. But she's got it back together now. And that's a wonderful thing. But that's why I'm saying this is deadly serious. This isn't, we laugh and we have a good time, and that's awesome. I'm all about having a good time. As far as I'm concerned, every AA meeting ought to be a pep rally for Jesus or whatever God you believe in. But there's some seriousness to this too. There's people out there, you know, we do a good job at San Angelo Solution Group with low bottom drunks because that's the ones we see a lot. But you know what? Down there in San Angelo, Texas, they're dropping like flies out in those suburbs. They're getting divorces. They're shooting each other in the head. You know, their kids are growing up or not growing up. They're wrecking their vehicles. They're dying. It's the same way here in Midland. 10 to 15% of people are alcoholics. Do you see 10 to 15,000 people in our AA meetings? No. Whose fault is that? Some of it's on us. We sit in our AA meetings and we wait for people to come in the door. And then, once they come in the door, then we say, oh, well, if they approach me, I'll talk to them. That's not what the book says. The book says when we were approached by those in whom the problem have been solved. Why would I leave the decision of who's going to help somebody through the steps up to the sickest person in the room? They need us. I'm not making fun of them. They need us. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know whether to ask a sponsor, have you had a spiritual awakening as a result of the 12 steps? They don't know how to ask a sponsor, how long does it take to get through the steps? Oh, that's back to the first 100. That's where I was going a while ago. Out of that first 100 alcoholics, historically, none of them took over 45 days to work these steps. Now, we've changed that, and we've got people, well, I can do 1 step a year, and I can do this, and I can do that. If that works for you, rock on. Just please don't sponsor anybody. Here's what happened. Back in the early 70s, when Nixon left office, he passed this act that made alcoholism and addiction a disease, and it meant insurance companies had to fund it, right? So, by 1980, 45% of the hospital rooms in the United States were set aside for alcoholics and addicts. Well, that's all well and good, except only 10 to 15% of us are alcoholics and addicts, the real deal. The others are sometimes just kind of hard drinkers and stuff. Well, they all went to those hospitals, and them hospitals treated them for 30 days, collected their big fat checks from the insurance company, patted them on the butt and said, go to AA. And a lot of them did, and bless their hearts. But a lot of them got in here that aren't real alcoholics. A lot of them got in here that aren't real addicts. A lot of them can stay sober for years and never work a step. It's not their fault. But when they sponsor the real deal and they don't get them through these steps quickly and thoroughly, people die. Our job, according to Bill Wilson, is an adequate presentation of this program. It is not to pat them on the butt and say, keep coming back. And then talk about when they don't make it back, talk about, well, they didn't really want it. How the hell do we know they didn't really want it? Did we spend the time? I'm not saying run up and grab every newcomer and say, I'm going to be your sponsor. But you know what I do? I walk up to these newcomers and I say, are you working the steps? No. Would you like me to help you with that, or get somebody to help you with that? That's all. If it don't work out, you can try somebody else, but let's get to work on these steps. Works great. It's a lot easier than walking up and telling them you're going to be their boss for the rest of their life. I tried that some, it didn't work. And as I got older, some of you guys got bigger, and the consequences of that for me weren't good. Guys, this is all about, and I have to say this program, and if you're new here, don't let this scare you. When I got here, this program is unashamedly all about God. I'm sorry, it is. But when I got here, I wasn't buying into that stuff, and guess what? I'm sober anyway today. Because when I got here, I had been told that God loved me, and that God wanted to burn me forever, and I'm thinking I don't need that kind of love. That's how I'd been raised. You're going to hell. The stuff I've done, you're going to hell for, and you're toast. That's it. So I wasn't really anxious to hear about God at all. Matter of fact, when I saw God on the wall, it kind of scared me to death. But they didn't tell me. You have to believe in something. Here's actually what the old sucker told me. He said, you're too ill to have any valid thoughts, beliefs, or opinions at this time. Guess what I was? I couldn't have any valid thoughts, beliefs. We don't care how you feel or what you think or what you believe when you get to Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't care. We care about what you do, because what you do is going to save your life. And what you do when your life gets saved is going to save other people's lives. It's not about how you feel. It's still not about how I feel today. I try to make it that way some. But for 51 years of my life, I based everything on feeling. That's the selfishness of this program. When it talks about selfish and self-centered is the root of our trouble, that's our real trouble. And I remember telling my sponsor, I'm not selfish. I have 50-something employees. I treat them well. I buy my wife whatever she wants. I buy my kids things. He said, yeah, so they'll leave you alone. You're a selfish bastard. And I said, no, you don't understand. And I argued with him. And finally he told me, you don't even know what being selfish is. You don't know the definition. And I'm like, oh, this ought to be good. Okay, Hammond, what's the definition? The definition of selfishness is that without some power in my life, If I'm an alcoholic and an addict, the most important thing to me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is how I feel. And I'll build shrines to it. I'll spend money on it. I'll do whatever I have to do it. Today, I've been taught that how I feel is kind of like the weather in West Texas. If you don't like it right now, it'll get better later, or it'll get worse later. If you're feeling on top of the world right now, you probably won't feel that way later. And if you're feeling down in the dumps, you'll feel better later. And you can't live your life based on that. I couldn't live my life based on that. I destroyed almost everything and everyone around me. That's what selfishness is. Today I've been taught that I can live my life on principles. The principles that are in these 12 steps. And if I take my actions based on principles, it doesn't matter what my stupid brain's telling me. Because see, for years I tried to control my brain. I'd go to all these churches and I'd try to get it right. And they'd say, if you believe like we believe, you could do this. I'm looking for switches to turn on belief up here and I can't find them. You know? They didn't tell me how to do that. If you think like we think, well, I still can't find the switch. And it turns out that in Alcoholics Anonymous, they said, if you'll take the actions we took, things will get better. And when you start taking the right actions, the brain, the feelings, and all that usually follow. And if they don't, I just keep taking the right actions anyway, because they will sooner or later. And it's not because I'm a great guy to do this, it's because I got no damn choice. It's do this or go on to the bitter end, blotting out my intolerable situation. If you've got a choice, you're in the wrong room. Alcoholics don't drink because they have a choice. Alcoholics drink because they have no power of choice left. They told me a story in early sobriety about a surgeon down in the hill country. This guy had been through treatment like 3 times. It was all worked out with his partners. He's an excellent surgeon. Lived down by San Angelo on one of them big houses up on one of them hills. And he'd been told by his partners at work, he'd been told by his wife and everything, you're going to treatment this time, that's it. If you don't get it, we're done. And he went to treatment down there and he heard the same message I heard from the same people I heard it a little bit before me. And he went home, and 2 weeks later he was drinking again. He lost his practice. He lost his big house on the hill. He lost his wife. He lost his kids. And finally, he shot himself in the head. That man was not drinking because he had a choice. That man was drinking against his own will. My willpower is no good in this deal. I cannot control this with my willpower, and I thought I could. The only thing my willpower is good for, this book tells me, is to take the actions to follow God's will. So here I am back in Andrews, and I'm not buying this God thing, and he tells me we're going to do this 3rd step prayer. And I'm looking at him. It's Sunday afternoon, 2 o'clock, that little building in Andrews. He jumps down there on his knees and said, come on, we're going to do this prayer. And I'm thinking, I am not getting in the floor on my knees with a grown man in West Texas to do anything. Because, you know, I'm arrogant and I'm prideful and I'm all that in a bag of chips. And anyway, he said, well, if I'm going to sponsor you, that's what we're going to do. Okay, so I got down there. And he said one line, and I repeated it after him. And he said a line, and I repeated it after him. I'm like, okay, that's done. He's like, oh, no. He said, every morning, I want you to get up on your knees. Get up, get on your knees, and do this 3rd step prayer. And I'm like, you don't understand. I can't do that. I don't believe it. It'd be hypocritical. And he just cackled. He's like, oh, you're going to tell me about hypocritical? Okay. And he said, well, can you do this? I said, what? He said, can you wake up in the morning? Can you get the friggin' book off the friggin' shelf, open it to page friggin' 63, and read the words to the friggin' wall? Yeah, I could do that. And guess what? I did that. And I continued to do that. And we continued to work our way through these steps. And the obsession got removed. And it's never came back. And that's the miracle of this program. You don't have to think about how you believe in God or any of that. I'm not sure I know God any better than I knew him then. But I do know all about God's power. It's been in my life for a long time, and it's made all the difference in the world to me and several other people. God's power is real, and it's with us. Right now in this room, there are miracles all over this room. If you're sitting here and you're a drug addict or an alcoholic and you're clean, you're a miracle. Do you know how lucky we are to be born in this 84-year period after Alcoholics Anonymous started? Used to, you were just written off, sent to the insane asylum, or left somewhere to die. They didn't have treatment centers. They didn't have all these places for us to try to get well. They didn't have none of that. You know what they did? You know how this started? They took this book, they wrote it, they agreed on it. Like I said, that's the biggest miracle. They agreed on it, and they mailed it out all over the country. And people had to read this book, figure these steps out, work these steps themselves, and then go find other drunks to work with. And that's how Alcoholics Anonymous was born. Today we gripe if we have to go to a meeting and sit through it too long. Today we gripe if the newcomer doesn't rush up to us. Man, we got it we're so blessed. The question is, what are we going to do with those blessings? Are we going to start do our real purpose? Because everybody in this room's got a real purpose, and everybody's got the same one. I hate to break it to you, and it's on page 77. I even have it tattooed on my arm right here. It's so important to me. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be a maximum service to God and the people about us. And that doesn't mean our real purpose is to be a maximum service, because that would put it back up to me who I was going to help and who I wasn't going to help. And I'm not qualified. That's above my pay grade. What it does is it tells me I have to fit myself. I have to make sure I'm physically, mentally, emotionally, and most important, spiritually fit to help people when God pops them up in front of me. And God will pop them up in front of you if you're spiritually fit. And if you're spiritually fit, you will see them. You'll notice that. And when He does, all you have to do is love them. Love them and help them do this stuff. You know, I was the most antisocial, uppity, didn't want nothing to do with you. You weren't as good as me, or you were better than me. I didn't like me. And who knew I was going to turn into a social butterfly? You know, I love alcoholics. I love drug addicts today, because y'all are me. That we share that thing. And it's a beautiful thing. And thank God I'm an alcoholic today. Because you know what? I would have stumbled on in my blindness thinking I was running the show, running my big company, and doing all that stuff. And I'd have never needed God for anything. And my life would have sucked. But I had to have God in my life. I had to find Him. And I found Him through those 12 steps. And it wasn't because I came in here on a winning streak. And it wasn't because I came in here singing all about all the praises of religion and all that. I hate when religion gets mentioned at an AA meeting, because there's a lot of newcomers that aren't into that stuff yet, and they don't need to be. They need to do this work, period. They need to take the actions we took, period. Are we willing to help them do that? We are at the San Angelo Solution Group, I can say that today. We have a group. When we ask we always ask, are there any newcomers? And we'll have a hand or two. We always ask who's available to sponsor. 90% of the room always holds up their hand. We are some sponsoring, message carrying folks. We carry messages. We carry the message to the Rivercrest Hospital, to the Journey Recovery Center, to the Bishop Street Boot Camp, to Shannon Behavioral. Lots of places. And it's not because we're great, it's because it's so much fun. My first sponsee, he's not here tonight, but he lives in Midland and he's still sober. I got it 6 weeks sober. I was 6 weeks sober when I got this guy. And I told my sponsor, I don't think I can do this. He said, you can do it. You know, and I worked the first 3 steps with him, and he came over there to Andrews, and we did his step, 4th and 5th step, up in my little office above my shop there in Andrews. And I'll never forget. I'll never forget walking out of there. And I will never forget realizing that for the first time, in 51 years, for the first time in my entire life, I had been exactly where God wanted me to be the last 2 hours, doing exactly what God wanted me to do. And that was better than any buzz, any drunk, anything I ever had in my life. And I get to see that all the time now. And then you walk in a meeting and you watch one of the guys you took through the steps starting to take somebody else through the steps. There's nothing like it. That's how we grow. Man, if you're not on board with that, get on board with it. I learned this much about these 12 steps doing them. And it was enough to get me the obsession removed. It was enough to get me recovered. And it was a beautiful thing. And it was one of the first miracles that ever happened to me. But when I started working with other men, I learned this much. People talk about, well, I got to go back through the steps every year. Well, I go back through them about 8 or 10 times a year, because every time I take a sponsee through them, I'm going through them. If they're having a tough time sharing something on their 5th step with me, I'll just give them some of mine. And trust me, when I give them some of mine, they're not bashful at all about telling me their stuff. It just works, guys. And it's just joy. You know, I want to read you something that Bill Wilson wrote in this book that just sums it all up perfectly to me. It says, while I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given to me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They, in turn, might work with others. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through worth and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it's just like that. My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problem. It was fortunate, for my old business associates remained skeptical for 1.5 years, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time, and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times have I gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It's a design for living that works in rough going. When you're feeling down and you're feeling like, oh, do this again today, and you're doing all that, get with an alcoholic. Take them through the steps. It's the most beautiful thing you'll ever experience. It's what makes life worth living today. Now, since my son died and since Mindy got sober, 2 years ago I was diagnosed with chronic leukemia. Later that month I was diagnosed with cirrhosis. I think God has a different idea because I feel fine. A week ago, I accepted a new job offer. I'm moving down to Laguna Vista, Texas, which is right by South Padre. I'm going to be working for Origins Treatment Center down there. I get to sling Big Book every morning to all them. I can't wait. It's what I love to do. But I mean, God brought all this full circle. And I'm going to tell you, the year I got sober, 2009, I got sober halfway through the year. And I made more money that year than I ever made in my life. And ever since then, it's come down little by little by little by little by little. And my happiness has gone up and up and up, and my peace. My life is so much simpler now. Me and my wife, we have a little small house that we just love and take care of the yard and the garden and all that stuff, and have sponsee. It's an active place. We've got sponsees coming and going, and kids and grandkids coming and going. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to live. And that's all a gift from God, because I don't deserve any of this, guys. I deserve to be laying off dead in one of those ditches out there on Telephone Road. You know, I'm the guy that woke up and accused my son of driving my motorcycle because it was on the other side of the yard from where I parked it, and then remembered driving down Taylor Road outside Andrews about 120 miles an hour that night, seeing if if I could peg that motorcycle out. So I'm the guy that came home and remembered that and got up the next day and said, this has to end now. So I sold the motorcycle. I'm a real alcoholic. But I am so blessed and so happy and so content. And I got people in this room that I absolutely love. And if I don't know you, you can believe it or not, but I love you anyway. If you're one of us, I love you. Good luck to you. Please do this deal, because it's got nothing to do with luck. If you're new here, just grab onto somebody that's done this work. Don't pick the person that's walking around like this. Pick the person that's excited. Pick the person that's saying, hey, life rocks. Because God did not save me from this hideous disease to be mad and frustrated and stuff. God saved me from this hideous disease to be happy, joyous, and free, and to celebrate His power and the power that's in this room right now. And there's a lot. And thank y'all so much.